Hello, everyone. We're about to do Module 1 and take a look at the law of compact and reasons for secession, and is it legal, is it not? Um, who, who makes the best argument? So we're kind of building upon the lesson that we started, gracious, about a month ago now. We're going to kind of review that a little bit about the reasons for South Carolina secession and the other southern states. And then we will look at Lincoln's response and see who makes the best argument there, at least the legal argument there. So we are going to present this and we'll see where it takes us. All right, so here it is, title screen right there. Law of compact. Can a state legally secede from the Union? Remember, we did this mystery document right here. If you go back to the founding of the United States under the Articles of Confederation, we know the states had more power than the national government did. They did that on purpose because they were scared of a tyrannical government. Then we know what happened there in the 1780s, 1770s, 1780s, and the debacle that was by not having a national government that was strong enough to take care of the states and to do and conduct business. So the Constitutional Convention came around, and then there was the big debate on the Constitution in itself. We the people over we the states, who has more authority, and obviously they were trying to flesh out what exactly that meant. So going back to John Adams, you remember, coming up with the problems that we're having on the foreign front with looking at the French Revolution and the war going on between Great Britain and France. You have a lot of problems that ensue, and in comes the Alien and Sedition Acts. And then we have these mystery documents. Alien Sedition Act was definitely to Democratic Republicans overstepping its bounds as far as the federal government's authority. So we have here with the Kentucky Resolutions that was written by Thomas Jefferson that said that, if a state should be able to nullify a federal act, a federal piece of legislation. Essentially, he's coming in right here and saying that if you look at, you allow for the federal government just to be able to be the exclusive judge of the extent of the powers delegated to it, that stops nothing short of despotism. And the states would definitely lose their authority and their power. So it was up to the states to be able to review legislation and to say whether the states should actually follow through with those or not. If you want to look at the entire document, with the Kentucky Resolutions is right there. James Madison authored this one, the Virginia Resolutions, that pretty much says the same thing here. That it follows of the necessity that there can be no tribunal above the authority to decide there, and whether the compact made by them, which of course is the states, is violated, it rests in the authority of the states themselves. So the states can look at the compact, the union, and decide whether the federal government has overstepped its bounds. Throughout the early 1800s, we know that still trying to figure out that idea between states' rights and federal authority and the limitations and where those lines kind of blur together. We talked about that many times with the idea of secession, going back many times, looking at the Federalists there during the War of 1812, going back to the South Carolina during the nullification crisis, and then throughout the 1850 and 1850s with southern states talking about secession over the extension of slavery. Then, and finally with the election of Lincoln, it does happen here December of 1860. So this is kind of where we left off there in class, is talking about South Carolina's ordinance for secession. So we discussed that, again, the southern states did not feel like they were doing anything wrong. They didn't feel like they were rebels. They thought that they were just trying to keep the status quo, and they believed that they were going to do the same thing that was done in 1776, which was to assert their authority. So here it is right there. You see South Carolina's ordinance for secession sounds a whole lot like the Declaration of Independence. If you look down here, I got a link that links up the Declaration of Causes of Seceding States, and it lists all the states there, and looks at why they were going to secede and their declarations that they made. And they're very similar to South Carolina, so we're just going to concentrate on that one. Now, remember, the South Carolina legislature there came up with these ideas that there's three principal reasons for secession. They put in there that our union, our government, was founded upon the idea of two great principles asserted in Declaration, which was the consent of the governed, and a government as that gets its authority and power from the people themselves. which is the consent of the governed, and then also that the people have the right to alter or abolish a government that is not protecting the rights of the people. So that's the first two. Those are the simple ones. And then where we left off with this one as well is they brought up the law of compact, that the Constitution itself is essentially a union, a contract amongst the states. And well, if just like other contracts, you can basically null and void those things. And in this case right here, it's the states who voluntarily went into the union in this contract, they can voluntarily leave it as well. And they're the ones that can essentially look at the other states and be the judge on whether those other states are upholding their end of the contract or the compact, which of course is in the Constitution. It's the law of the land. It's supposed to be the supreme law. So are those northern states doing what they said they were going to do when we founded our country there in 1787? And of course, they presented all of this, their information. And remember, we looked at this right here and whether they had a good, did they make a good argument here? And dealing with fugitive slaves, were northern states upholding their bargain in the Constitution about the fugitive slave clause, about escaped slaves being actually turned back into to the states where they had run away from. You look at the personal liberty laws that were passed in several states, and they're all listed right there, that these states had essentially, you can see it right there, had nullified the act of Congress or rendered useless any attempt to execute the fugitive slave clause. And you can actually look at the laws that were passed in those that are state law, those states must follow. And also the Constitution, does it recognize slavery? It did with the Three-Fifths Compromise. We discussed that. So therefore, it is slaves are legal property. And look again here, it says non-slaveholding states have denied the property rights of 15 slaveholding states. So if the Constitution recognizes slaves as property, then, well, these states who have passed these personal liberty laws have also denied the property rights of the slaveholding states at the same time period. So going against the Constitution. And then they also went back to the next election, the last election that was just held in 1860. And it says here, sectional party has been created and Abraham Lincoln has been elected, which is and the Republicans and Lincoln will continue to be subversive when it comes to the Constitution in itself and stopping the spread of the Southern way of life into the territories, talking about slavery there. Then, of course, you can see right here, they finished up that it's just going to continue to be kind of a moot point for the southern states, as the guarantees of the contract they're going to be ignored. And slaveholding states will no longer have power of self-government, and there'll be a sectional rift between northern and southern states that just will only continue to deepen. And as a result, so they're going to leave. Now, remember, we talked about this as well. We're just looking at the legal aspect of the secession. We've already talked about, Civil War is going to be about the institution of slavery without a doubt. So we're not trying to dehumanize or trying to say that slavery didn't have anything to do with this. Obviously, it does, and you can look at that those excerpts I had from the South Carolina Ordinance, and you can tell as well. And we'll have another lesson later on down the line about slavery and how the Civil War is going to change it later. But if you look at it right here, so South Carolina is going to be the first one to secede. So even before Lincoln gets sworn into office, you can say from South Carolina all the way up to Texas, you see that there's going to be some 7 states who have already basically take up and secede and leave the Union, pretty much saying that all those the same thing. Notice that you're going to have other states, slave states, that are going to take kind of a wait and see approach and see what Lincoln's going to do about this. So here's Jefferson Davis going to be sworn in on February the 18th, 1861. That's in Montgomery, Alabama there with the Confederate States of America, first and only president. He is up there giving his speech about taking office, being sworn in. So who is our president at the time period? We said that Lincoln is not going to be sworn in until March. Well, we've got Democratic James Buchanan, who probably will go down as one of the 2 or 3 worst presidents we've ever had, which is saying a lot because we've had a few really, really bad ones, including the ones that were only there for just a couple of weeks. He is right there with them. Reason being is that he was just so indecisive as a leader. He was a Democrat from Pennsylvania. As the southern states were starting to secede, he was, obviously he's a lame duck, so not too many people are listening to him. Is that he, essentially said secession was illegal, but the federal government didn't have any authority to force these states back into the Union. What does that mean? We have no idea. But we're going to see Lincoln's problems that he's going to have as well, trying to do this same thing. So, trying to keep states from leaving and getting them back into the Union. How are you going to do this without the use of force? Uh, Force. It's going to take force to actually get this done. But Buchanan did try to compromise with the seceding states, and you actually saw several congressmen of border states and northern Democrats who were trying to work out some type of compromise with the southern states as well. And with either some type of constitutional amendment added to the to legalize, well, I say legalize, but to make sure that slavery would not be touched. But it just not going to work. It was too little, too late. I think the southern states right then, obviously with those fire eaters, were not going to come back regardless. So as a result of that, well, it's going to be a disaster. I got to hear is a big fail, which is definitely going to be the case here. So that's canon. So by the time Lincoln gets in there, like we said, 7 states have already have left the Union, have formed their own government, had their own president. Well, did they really actually leave the Union? Did they actually form their own country? Well, we're going to take a look at that as well. So here's Abraham Lincoln being sworn in March 4th, 1861. And we're going to look at little tidbits of his inaugural address. And I'm going to give you a chance later on to look at even more of it to see what he says about secession. And essentially, he's going to say secession is anarchy. Where is it when in a democracy or a republic where you're going to have a minority that is allowed to do whatever it is that they want to do, despite the majority wanting something that's the opposite? Anarchy. That'd be no rules and no laws whatsoever. So he's going to say secession is illegal, point blank, right off the bat. All right. But he's going to make a better argument than just saying it that way. All right. So here it is when you look at Lincoln's response that he's going to make here. First, was the deal of slavery itself. And he said this throughout his campaign, that he had no authority and was not going to touch slavery where it existed. But then on the other hand, he said that, of course, obviously it was his moral obligation. He would not let it spread into the territories. But he did say he wasn't going to touch it, all right, where it existed. And he said that throughout the campaign. But we'll see. And of course, we've already mentioned that as well. He really didn't have any authority to do it at that time period. We're going to see what happens as the Civil War goes on and see if he changes his mind and his tune on that one right there. And it continues going on right there that it's up to him to make sure that he is protecting the Constitution, that he is going to uphold everything in the Constitution for all the states as it is. All right, so that's of course some of that right there. Keep going forward here. So when you look at it, why would seceding Southern states not believe Lincoln at this time period and take him at his word that he would not touch slavery where it existed? Well, one, back to 1858. What did he say during the Lincoln-Douglas debates with the House divided speech? Go back as well and look at the Republican platform talking about not allowing slavery to spread in the territories. And maybe going back into 1856, there's some Republicans in that party who are adamant about slavery being a moral sin and being wrong. So they would give slaveholding states some Lincoln might not hold when it came to that. And also, you got to look at a conundrum, a dilemma, without a doubt, about trying to keep the Union together. It was one thing for him to say House divided speech there when he's just trying to run for Senate in Illinois, but it's another thing when he gets into the office and you've already got 7 states seceding, and then you've got multiple other states that are slave states that could also leave the Union at the same time period. I think, of course, Lincoln really wanted to. I think, deep down, he wanted to strike a decisive blow against slavery. He would do it as quick as he possibly could. Case right here, he's just trying to keep the Union together. So that is his main goal as he's addressing the southern states. But it is going to get some criticism because he's not going to be willing to compromise on a lot of these things, all right, when it comes back to it. But overall, his main message is going to say, you can come back if you want to. You didn't really secede anyway, so if you want to come on back, come on back. We'll see that later on down the line as well. So Lincoln is going to address all those issues that South Carolina and other states had for seceding, and he is going to look at this fugitive slave. And he says, it scarcely can be questioned about the fugitive slaves and their return. And it says right here that slaves who came within the terms of this clause shall be delivered up. Their oaths are unanimous. So he's saying that the federal government will continue to do this, to return fugitive slaves if they escape from the South, one of the southern slave states, and go to a northern state. They will be returned. Um, it says right here, there is some difference of opinion whether the clause should be enforced by the national or state authority. So he's saying, well, does it matter if the federal government gets involved in this and actually goes to actually capture these slaves and return them? Or is it, or if the states do it, is that going to be good enough? Problem with southern states, you're going to say, well, you had all those other states that, well, passed those personal liberty laws that were not going to cooperate with returning fugitive slaves. But Lincoln says it's going to be done. We're going to enforce it. Everybody out there's, who's swears an oath to the Constitution, swears an oath to the entire Constitution. So they're gonna go along with that. But then Lincoln kind of turns the page a little bit and says, well, wait a second. Well, what about the other folks? What about safeguarding the liberty of the folks who are not slaves and who are could be forced back into bondage if they've been, free. So he says, well, what about them? It's also that the Constitution guarantees them citizenship, so we've got to protect them too. So you're not going to just have slave catchers come and just grab people off the streets and say, hey, you're a slave, you're going back into bondage. He's saying, well, wait a second, that part of the Constitution needs to be protected too if they are citizens in those particular states. So here it is. How does Lincoln address personal liberty laws passed by northern states to protect African Americans? He says right there, they must be protected as well. So we're going to uphold the Fugitive Slave Clause, but citizens also need to be protected as well. Now, other things. Can a state continue to enforce state law in opposition of the Constitution, federal law, and Supreme Court decisions? That's one of the big things we've been talking about. I mean, how can a state say one thing that goes totally against the Constitution or federal law? Well, southern states are going to say, well, yes, all right, this can actually happen. And some of those personal liberty laws are going to be passed to protect individuals. So you can say some northern states would agree as well. But Lincoln's going to say, nope, it ain't going to happen there. The law of the land is going to be the law of the land. So when it comes down to it, what about this law of compact? That's what we said before. So when you see it there, it's just kind of debating and whether the northern states are going to uphold their end of the bargain, and the southern states think that they can't. Well, who's going to be the judge? Can a state legally leave the union? Can they legally leave this contract? And well, let's see what Lincoln's got to say about this. And this is really interesting stuff. So you got to think, what comes first? What actually created the United States of America? Was it just the Constitution? Was it the Declaration? Or did it even go beyond that? Was it even before that, even during the colonies? Like, were we a United States, even before we knew we were a United States? And Lincoln's going to kind of allude to that. He's going to say it goes deeper than just the Constitution. He's going to say right here that the Constitution of the Union is perpetual. It is implied, through fundamental law, and it's safe to assert that we've been here, we've been the United States forever. Another good part of this right here is that it's safe to assert that no government proper ever had a provision to destroy itself. So when you form this contract, there's nothing in there that says, oh yeah, here's a way that you can get out of the union. Here's a way that you can destroy the government. It can't be done, right? So he continues on though. It's not even just that. He says, oh, wait a second. What about this idea that just one state is going to be the judge of all the other states, whether those states are upholding their end of the bargain in the compact, which is the Constitution? And well, Lincoln says, oh, wait a second, that's not going to happen. What needs to occur, and it says it right here, that essentially, shouldn't it be all parties who made it be the judge of whether one particular state or the national government's not abiding to the rules in the contract and abiding to the laws that were laid down in the Constitution? It says one party to a contract may violate it, break it, so to speak, but it's going to require all the states to get involved to actually rescind it. So if all the states wanted to kick somebody out, I guess you could. But if all the states don't agree to it, then it ain't going to happen, right? And we know, of course, you getting any type of unanimous decision is not going to occur. So essentially, he's saying, nope, South Carolina, other southern states, law compact, you can't be the judge of it yourself. It's going to be up to all the states to actually judge these things. So therefore, you haven't left the union at all. And it keeps going on right here. It says, therefore, the legal contemplation of the union is perpetual, confirmed by the history of the union itself. Again, going all the way back to colonial times. The union is much older than the Constitution, just like we said. It goes back to the Declaration. It goes back to the colonies being set forth, and just that livelihood and that culture that we created way back starting in 1607 and going even further. You probably could go past 1607 as well. But all of that, all of these shared culture and shared heritage that we have, that's what's created the union, not just a document and a piece of paper, right? That's one interesting point to it. Other things he says right here, you cannot lawfully get out of the Union. It resolves ordinance that effect are legally void. So essentially, Carolina, all the way through Texas, Alabama, you haven't left the Union, you haven't formed a government, you're just in insurrection or you're in a revolution, you're a rebellion right there. So essentially, you haven't left, you haven't created your own government, you don't have anybody like President Jefferson Davis. There's no such thing as a President Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis did not. He's still a citizen of the United States, so therefore he cannot be the president of a newly formed country. All right. So therefore, all this stuff is insurrection. It's in rebellion. And that's the way that Lincoln's going to have to address it throughout the entire Civil War. It's kind of interesting. And it continues going on right there. So therefore, that he is going to continue to, uphold his oaths to defend the Constitution. He says that right there. He keeps going right here that I trust this will not be regarded as a menace, but only as a declared purpose of the Union, that it will constitutionally defend and maintain itself. So therefore, that they have to keep the Union together. That's Lincoln's, what he's sworn to do is protect the entire Union. And he continues on, and I got the whole inaugural address down here at the bottom, and he says essentially, you pull it up right here at the very bottom. It's a really, really good link too, and it's got like kind of already paraphrased. Well, it's got the entire speech for you, but then it also has there towards the bottom. Of course, my internet's really slow. Oh, there it is. You can see that it actually kind of gives you the main idea, each part of the speech as well, which is pretty good for you. But the tail end of it down here, it's going to say essentially that the momentous issue of civil war, that's in the hands. In your hands, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen, and not in mine, is a momentous issue of civil war. The government will not assail you. It's not going to attack you. You cannot have no conflict without being yourself. No oath registered in government, while I shall have the most solemn one, preserve, protect, and defend it. So that essentially is what Lincoln's going to do right there, and that's his response. I'm going to see how that's going to wash out there. So here's what Lincoln's got to say then. So what about the law of compact? Lincoln, the Union's perpetual. It's never ending. It will continue to be so from now until eternity. And it's pretty much it. And again, it's going to be deeper than just the Constitution itself. We were created way before that. Other things, no government creates a way for it to dissolve itself. So therefore, there's no way to get rid of this union, get rid of this contract, get rid of the United States of America, or to leave it. It's not going to happen. And then, of course, there it is again here that requires all states to agree to a peaceable end. All right, the union. So if there is going to be some type of change, it's going to have to go the route at how the Constitutional Convention took place, that all the states are going to have to send delegates and you're going to change the government that way. That's the only way it's going to happen. One state, two states, three states, 5, 12, whatever it's going to be, they're not going to be able to actually do this. It's going to have to be all the states together that can peaceably either leave the union or fix and change the government. And well, obviously, that's probably not going to happen. So the big thing we're going to look at here as we go to step 2 and step 3 is we're going to look at, is his argument better than Calhoun's and the other seceding states? So who made a great legal argument? I think is the good one right there. So trying to take I guess the emotional end out of it, and actually who makes a good legal argument towards the Constitution and states and whether they can secede or not. So, and of course I summed it up for you again. Lincoln's going to come up with this right here. So again, states cannot legally secede and therefore are in rebellion. Southern states are not going to like that. Southerners didn't want to be called rebels at that time period, because called rebels, that meant that they're doing something wrong. They didn't think they were doing anything wrong. They thought they were just upholding the spirit of 1776. Lincoln will protect federal property. That's going to be, our second lesson that we're going to have. Our second module is going to deal with Fort Sumter and other possessions and how that's all going to play out. And again, you see also Lincoln's going to defend the Constitution. Southern states want to leave peaceably, and the federal government just to evacuate, all the property that the federal government owns in the South. They just want them to leave. All right, just kind of Southern states, we want to get out of the Union, leave peacefully. Federal government, you just disappear, and we'll do our own thing. That's not going to go over too well with Lincoln and a lot of the Republicans at the time period, and some Northern Democrats as well. So the big question we've also going to have in step 3 is, who's going to be the blame for this constitutional crisis? Is it going to be the Southern states? Is it going to be the fire eaters? Is it going to be Lincoln? Is it going to be Davis? Who exactly is to blame? Or is it a combination of kind of all of these things kind of together? That kind of all the way goes back to the Articles of Confederation. So, anywho, that's what we got. That's our first step here. So, um, I wish you luck on step 2, step 3. If you got any questions, just let me know.